Today we're going back to a time when everyone was black and white and everything stank of cigarettes. Here are the top 10 films of 1950. When I say top 10, my favourite 10 films of 1950. In at number 10 is Winchester 73. I'd say that James Stewart stars in, but this technically wouldn't be true. The rifle is really the star of the film, and you follow its journey from outlaw to good guy to Native American, and little sort of individual stories of how people get the rifle and use it. It's a really interesting format, and people really fucking love this gun.
But I'd give to have that gun.
This is the finest gun in the world.
That's real pretty.
Mm-hmm. I would give a year's wages for that gun.
This is gun I want. This is gun I want. That's a real fine gun.
Where did you get that gun?
And it's a really interesting structure. It's not always entirely successful. Some of the little stories don't work as well as others, but it's always interesting and it's really beautiful to look at. Also, James Stewart is, as ever, incredibly likable, and I love James Stewart in fight sequences and action sequences. He genuinely looks worried for his life and also looks like he's genuinely trying to hurt the other person. Really interesting film. Winchester 73. In at number 9 is Orphic, or Orpheus in English, or Greek, or something. This incredibly French film is the middle part of John Cocteau's Orphic trilogy, set in 1950s Paris. This is a modern day take on the Greek myth of Orpheus, the charming poet who everyone falls in love with. The film revolves around Orpheus entering the afterlife and how he and a version of death fall in love with each other. The effects, mostly involving mirrors, are fantastic, and you can see how influential Cocteau was to filmmakers such as David Lynch. Indeed, the afterlife here reminds me a little of the Red Room or the Black Lodge from Twin Peaks. It's a really interesting film to watch, and for the effects alone and a really sort of eerie, odd atmosphere. In at number 8, The Asphalt Jungle. John Huston's classic noir where a bunch of criminals get together to rob some diamonds and everything goes off without a hitch and they all live happily ever after.
Well, everything go all right?
Of course not. It all goes to shit. The film is gorgeous to look at and the ensemble cast is fantastic. Magnificent Sterling Hayden is terrifying as the short-tempered gambling addict, and Louis Calhern nearly steals the show as the cowardly money man behind the plot. And there's even an early appearance from Marilyn Monroe as Marilyn Monroe.
I had the market send over some salt mackerel for you. I know how you love it for breakfast.
Some sweet kid.
In at number 7, The Gunfighter. The Gunfighter stars Gregory Peck as outlaw Jimmy Ringo, a famed former outlaw who's now sort of just desperately trying to escape his infamy and fame. Much like Winchester 73, this has a really interesting structure. It's mostly set in one bar in one town where Jimmy Ringo comes in and he just wants to meet up with his old flame. And the film revolves around how the town becomes alive with buzz that this famed gunslinger is around. You have people wanting to challenge him, you have kids arguing, who's a better gunfighter, him or Wyatt Earp. You have the women of the town desperate to kick out this murderer, and you also have the sheriff who's a former friend of his. And it's a really interesting film that sort of deals with the idea of fame and not being able to get rid of your past, really, considering he had done terrible things and that they're haunting him now. Really interesting movie with a very, Gregory Peck playing against type as a noble, stoic man. But he's great in it.
You're asking for trouble, Mr. Ringo.
You already got it, partner. Because I got a gun on you under this table. And it's pointing smack at your belly.
Really good, solid western. In at number 6, Born Yesterday. Some movies are made great by one performance, and that's the case here, with Judy Holliday playing the ditzy Billy Dawn, for which she won the Best Actress Oscar in a year with stiff competition. Holiday is hilarious with her high-pitched New York accent, which to me seems like maybe it could be one of the original inspirations for Harley Quinn in the Batman animated series.
Come a long way from the chorus, all right.
I wasn't only in the chorus. I spoke lines.
Really?
Of course.
How many?
How many what?
Lines did you speak?
5?
Born Yesterday tells the story of a rough, self-made man who comes to Washington in order to buy a senator or a congressman, and he brings along his, his arm candy, and he entrusts her to William Holden's journalist in hope that he might be able to educate her. And what happens is, over the course of the movie, you see, you see Billy Dawn's eyes opening, and she sort of sees the corruption of her boyfriend and wants to better herself. And she never stops being funny in it, but does also a great job of showing her progress. I mean, it's a really good movie, and Holiday is just amazing in it.
Just start reading. If you don't like it, stop. Start something else.
Oh, there's only one thing my eyesight isn't so high.
Well, why don't you wear glasses?
Glasses?
Sure, why not?
Because it's terrible.
Before we enter the top 5, let's do a quick rundown of some other notable releases in 1950. 1950 saw the release of the original Father of the Bride, starring Spencer Tracy, Elizabeth Taylor, and Martin Short. It also features one of the most terrifying dream sequences I think I've ever seen. Disney released Cinderella, which bizarrely seemed to focus quite heavily on the rats that Cinderella called her friends. Gun Crazy, a Bonnie and Clyde-esque love crime caper, featured one of the strangest but best seduction scenes in film history. And James Stewart played a lunatic who talked to a giant invisible rabbit named Harvey. Harvey, in fact, features probably my favourite performance of 1950 from a man who's only in 2 very small scenes.
Hurry now and stick with them all afternoon. Quickly, boy, quickly.
Okay.
Oh, Gunfighter! You insist he's there, then I must act on the assumption that he's there. Binninger, you failed.
I didn't fail, Judge. I haven't even tried yet. I've been in the doctor's office.
In at number 5, Rashomon. Kurosawa's amazing period film revolving around a scene of a crime told from different, contradicting perspectives. Toroshiho Mishun, I'm going to be saying that wrong, is outstanding as the bandit, and he has one of the greatest laughs in cinema history. You even get a sort of Japanese horror film sequence in which a medium tells the story of a murdered samurai, and it really is pretty terrifying. My highlight for me is the difference between how people tell the story of a samurai bandit fighting from their own perspectives, and it's a beautiful, choreographed sword fight, and the actuality of a fight in which it's messy and they're terrified is brilliant and really rarely done in film. I mean, they sort of did it in Bridget Jones, but... In at number 4, Night and the City. Jules Toussaint's gorgeous film noir is a real treat. Set in post-World War II London, it tells the story of Harry Fabian, played by Richard Widmark. London's never looked better. It's absolutely stunning and shot beautifully. And it's the perfect setting for this slightly odd story of a hustler trying to get control of the Greco-Roman wrestling racket in London. But the film is just fantastic, and everyone in it is amazing. Widmark plays it with just the right level of charm and desperation. The film also features a standout performance from Googie Withers. I'm going to be slightly biased here, she's my grandmother, but She's amazing in the film as this trapped woman in a broken marriage to a man who owns a nightclub, and her desperate attempts to try and get out of that life. The whole film reeks of desperation, which is just what you need in a noir film. And of course it all ends well and everybody lives happily ever after.
Give her the blood money she cut my throat for you! Pay her the double bill!
In at number 3, All About Eve. Bette Davis gives a 5-star performance as Margot Channing, an ageing actress who takes on an assistant in the form of Anne Baxter's Eve Harrington, an obsessive fan and aspiring actress. Channing's life is slowly ruined by the ambitious and seemingly calculating Eve. This film has so much to say about fame and obsession, and which is still completely relevant today, how people will do anything to become famous, and about how people desperately want to hold on to this fame. The rest of the cast is excellent, featuring people playing directors, producers, and even a member of the sort of gossip press, which seems incredibly relevant even to today, these sort of manipulative, incredibly powerful people who can change perception of people in the limelight. The film even features an early performance of Marilyn Monroe playing Marilyn Monroe.
I don't want to make trouble. All I want is a drink.
In at number 2, Los Olvidados. This Mexican film, whose title means The Forgotten Ones, is a brutal piece of social realism revolving around street children in Mexico City. There's a real sense of hopelessness that runs throughout this. You sort of get a feeling that no one's ever going to make it, and there's no light at the end of the tunnel for any of these poor characters. And it's a pretty shocking film for 1950 in terms of some of the issues it deals with. I mean, it deals with paedophilia, it deals with rape, and it never shies away from kind of showing just how desperate the situation is for these children. It never flinches away from showing incredibly shocking sequences, whether it be boys beating up an old blind man, a bunch of boys bullying a man with no legs, or a scene of a boy beating another boy to death with a piece of wood, to music that sounds like something straight out of a John Williams Star Wars score. It also features one of the greatest sort of antagonists, I think, in film history, this sort of central bully who is so horrible in it, but still by the end of the film you feel he's a tragic figure because he's completely trapped. This is a really depressing but fascinating watch. At only an hour and 6 minutes, I think it's really worth seeing. I think the whole thing's on YouTube, and I think it's pretty ahead of its time. And in at number 1 is Sunset Boulevard. This is one of my favourite films of all time. This Hollywood set noir. I mean, technically it's a noir, it's known as a noir, but it's also sort of a horror film, it's sort of a dark comedy, it's got everything in it. Tells the story of a screenwriter who's sort of run out of money and is a bit desperate, who is taken in by an aging, once incredibly famous film star in her terrifying, almost sort of Frankenstein's castle-esque manor on Sunset Boulevard. What other film starts with a dead man floating in a pool narrating the story that's about to happen before moving on to a sequence involving a chimpanzee's funeral? I mean, this film has everything. Those are the two things I want in movies, but it's so odd. William Holden is great as the struggling scriptwriter taken in by the faded era golden Hollywood film star played amazingly by Gloria Swanson. Holden throughout this film has this sense of embarrassment, especially as it goes on, and he just goes along with it. I mean, he's great at playing both quite a strong-willed man but incredibly weak at the same time, and anytime I see weakness on film, I immediately relate to it. And I think he's amazing in it. But of course, it's Gloria Swanson who steals the show. She's the Dracula of this piece. She's this sort of horrific but incredibly human, tragic figure, self-obsessed, again bringing up sort of themes that's brought up in All About Eve. She almost overacts in it, but this completely works and sets up, but as she's a character from the silent era and everything sort of. Billy Wilder is such an amazing director, and in this, I can't remember who said the quote. I think it's from an original review of it or something that says that this is about the worst of Hollywood made by the best of Hollywood. This is such an amazing film. It looks amazing, the score's amazing, every performance is amazing, and you really don't know what's going to happen next, despite the fact you know how it ends. The film not only has one of the greatest openings in film history, but also definitely one of the greatest endings, with Gloria Swanson slowly moving towards camera. So, a quick rundown of the top 10. In at number 10, Winchester 73. In at number 9, Les Orphic. In at number 8, The Asphalt Jungle. In at number 7, The Gunfighter. In at number 6, Born Yesterday. In at number 5, Rashomon. In at number 4, Night and the City. In at number 3, All About Eve. In at number 2, Los Olvidados. And in at number 1, Sunset Boulevard. Well, that was my list. What are your favourite films of 1950 or whatever? What did I miss out? Loads, probably. Cheers.